Hey, did you hear me? Hey, don't you walk away from me. Did you hear what I said? Don't you walk away. No! Yeah, you better.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am.
I don't understand. Why?
What do you mean? Wait a second, what are we doing? You said cross the line. If
Cross the line if you're going to quit.
Oh. Do it again. I forgot the liquor stores close at 8.
A hero doesn't care if you're a bunch of scary alcoholic bums. Everybody! Everyone's a hero.
You're fired!
No, I'm not.
Oh, yes, you are! So you can take your Pulitzer and your beloved Underwood and your change of underwear and clear out.
Do you work for me?
Fantastic. I don't know what's going to happen. It's been a week and suddenly I pay some attention to that man behind the curtain. If you could, thank you. Hey, Mark here, and I am the Cinemaniac. We are Cinemaniacs collectively making us the titular Cinemaniacs. I'm back. Sorry I was away for a little bit while. I was once again asked to leave the state, but I'm back and on work release, and now we're going to do a crazy amount of catch-up, right? It's been like 2 weeks since I've been here. There must be like dozens of theatrical films to talk about, right? No, there's 2. Yeah. It's fantastic. I'm like, hey, I got a long weekend out of town. I have all these 16-screen theaters. What'll I go see? My choices are The Lion King or pretty much it. So we're going to talk about The Lion King, but first we will talk about the first film that I've actually been excited to see in theaters in many moons. And I tend to sort of rein in the excitement about movies because it's easier to be disappointed if you're looking forward to something. So we have the newest film from Quentin Tarantino, set in a La La Land of long ago, amongst the simmering heat and social unrest and wild creativity and death of the studio system that was 1969. You got your Brad Pitt, you got your Leonardo DiCaprio, you got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Although you who just watched that on Facebook Live just got to see something that the home viewing audience will never know about. It's a little edit note for me right there. Apparently that was a Red Band trailer that I grabbed. So, being a Tarantino film, there is language, like some of you may have just heard in that trailer, and violencia, which is to be expected, and adult content and all that. Boy, I really loved this. I loved this a lot. I've seen this movie twice in the span of a couple of days, and I want to see it again. I was ready to watch it again as soon as I saw it yesterday for the second time. So, what is this about? Not really going to tell you. I didn't really know anything about this going in. I tried to maintain radio silence like I do with films that I'm excited about so that I can just let it wash over me as it happens. Basic premise. It's Hollywood, February to August 1969. You're following Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, who is a star of a Western TV series who has now, a decade later, fallen out of favor in Hollywood. He's on the skids. His best friend, confidant, stuntman, gopher, Cliff Booth, portrayed by Brad Pitt, is sort of along for the ride, not really doing stunt work anymore because he's not getting the stunt work because his boss isn't really getting the acting work. And it's just these two best friends, rambling guys moving their way through Hollywood, trying to get a hook into any kind of work while the world is kind of moving beyond them. At the same time, you have, boy, I really don't want to say too much about this. This is really best if you don't know much about this movie, so I'm really not going to get into the plot at all. I'll get into the impressions it made on me. So this is set in a time and place that I find very attractive, very comfortable. Late 60s Hollywood. Very nice recreation of that time and space. Be it the clothes, the music, the decor. Didn't feel phony like a lot of recreations of the 60s do to me. Not that I was there, but I saw enough of it through documentaries and old TV and movies to get a good feel for it. It's Tarantino. He likes a lot of the same stuff that I like, so there's a lot of references to real-world actors, directors, movies, TV shows, things like that. The soundtrack is all actual recordings from KHJ Radio, Boss Radio in LA. That's a really nice thing that unifies. I picked up on that watching this the second time, is that it's a smaller world back at this point in the 60s, and everybody pretty much listened to the same radio station or two. So these various characters, they're all connected through work and through being all in the company town and listening to the same radio station. And a lot of the people you see intersect with each other throughout the work and personal lives in interesting ways. This movie is very, very funny, funnier than I expected it would be. It is extremely dark and serious at times. Sometimes that's a hard tone for it to balance because this involves some real world things that are not funny in the extreme. And in the film, you see the path of these characters leading toward these real-world events that are very not funny. And there's some humor here and there. And I'm thinking, boy, if you're going to try to make this a laughing matter, I don't think I'm on board with that. And he doesn't really do that, Tarantino. He does something that surprised pretty much everybody who has seen this film to a great degree. It's something that had me doubled over with laughter and applauding and cheering. I really don't want to say much more beyond it about that, beyond that, but it's really, really well done. It's really not a strong narrative for this film. It's these two guys moving through Hollywood, getting gigs, and just kind of hanging out, and some of these other people who are historical figures they intersect with. It's really more about a recreation and an evocation of a time and place that is very, very effective. Watching it the second time, I found myself looking at all the corners of the sets. I think, what's that record under his TV stand, and what's in the cabinet, and what's on the wall, and what are the posters, and what's the artwork in the background, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm not going to say much more about that. This is a movie that I do wonder, though, if normal people will like, not film people, because it is set in Hollywood. It is filled with references to actors, directors, and actual, times, places, and films. And I don't know. I always get the gut feeling that normal people don't care about movies. I might be wrong. This has been pretty successful so far, so we'll see. I wonder how this will do over time. I know it's done really well this weekend, so we'll see if normal people like it. The conversation I had with a normal guy while I was at the urinal after watching it the second time, he seemed to like it a lot, and he didn't know all the historical facts and figures, but he thought it was phenomenal. So maybe it's just me, and I don't know what I'm talking about, which is more than entirely possible. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood out now. You can see this film on digital, 4K. You can see this film on 35mm like I did. You can even see this film in 70mm, which is a little weird to me because it wasn't shot in 70mm, but hey, it's doable in bigger towns. The town we live in actually has 70mm capability, so who knows, maybe sometime that may come to town this way. But I would certainly encourage anybody who likes Tarantino or likes old Hollywood or likes the leads, because DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are phenomenal. Margot Robbie and the character she plays is great. Brad Pitt, his character, based to a large degree, the Cliff Booth and what's his name? The Brad Pitt and the DiCaprio characters, very much based on the relationship of Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, who were best friends. One was the stuntman for the other. They lived together and had, Hollywood adventures. The Pitt character, I think, is who I want to be when I grow up. I think I've determined that. So anyway, that's out in theaters now. Now we're going to move on to that movie that has locked up screens from coast to coast. So if you're a dude like me and you want to see something other than this movie, or other than a movie that's been out for 3 or 4 weeks, you're kind of hosed. So thanks, Disney. We have the latest in the series of live-action remakes, even though all that live-action is computer animation, the modern equivalent of cell animation. We have the tale of Simba, not Kimba, and what it takes to be a man and a man in the Serengeti when you have dealt with the death of your father and nefarious dealings by family members and all that other stuff that it takes to be the Lion King. I saw the original Lion King. I'm not bragging. When it came out in the theater. Never much of a Disney fan after I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I watched the Disney movies, the old classics, when they would put them back into theaters, which is a fantastic idea. They should allow people to do that again someday. And I would see the new ones on occasion, but when we moved into the 90s and Disney really came back in a strong way with their animated films, I was a little too old, or I didn't really care, but I saw them all because, they were big popular films. And I saw The Lion King, and I thought it was fine. Didn't change my life, but it was fine. I was, in my 20s at that point, I think, or pretty close to it. And so now when it comes to time to do a remake, I don't have any strong feelings about it whatsoever. I went into this film extremely not caring. I got to see it for the show. I do my duty for you because you really, really are passionate about hearing what I have to say about these things. And so I didn't go in with any beefs. I was just like, show me something. And I went in expecting, though, wow, I'm going to see the same movie I saw before, but it'll just look realistic. And that's pretty much what this is. I have a friend, Jess, who works at the drive-in with me, and she's a huge fan of the Lion King. She watched that movie on tape 1 billion times as a kid. She knows it backwards and forwards. So she went to see it, and her quibbles with the film were where they diverged from the original film. This follows the original animated Disney film very, very closely, with some minor changes. Some things are left out, some things are tweaked, some things are added, but not by much. So she had a problem with things where they were different from the original. My attitude with a remake is, I think you should do things differently, because otherwise we still have the original movie. They don't burn the negatives. Disney does the closest thing they can to doing that, but it's still there to be available, to be seen someday by somebody. So this follows the original very closely. A lot of the dialogue is similar or the same. The songs are all in there and done again. It's just done with pretty photorealistic animals, CGI animals. This is done by Jon Favreau, who for me did Swingers long ago. For you, maybe, you know, Hap or Happy in the Iron Man movies, but also he directed the Jungle Book, live-action Jungle Book remake, which kind of kickstarted this whole wave of remakes for Disney a couple of years ago. And in that film, too, I was very impressed, where there were times where I wasn't sure if maybe they mixed some actual animals in with the fake ones just so to do something. But it's all CG, it's all fake. It looks pretty realistic to me. It looks lovely. It was really well executed. A couple things. So, okay, I'm not a huge fan of the original Lion King, so I'm not passionate about it. So to see it done again, I'm like, yes, that's just like the movie I saw, but it looks realistic. So I'm not passionate about this at all. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was phenomenal. I thought it was really well done. The emotional moments worked. Very well done visually. So if you like this sort of thing, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this film. For me, what I found interesting was in the original animated film, with a cell animated film, where you're not trying to make things look realistic, you can have the Scar character be really nasty and have all kinds of crazy lighting effects and really make him a villainous villain. In this, if you're trying to make it look realistic, well, animals' faces aren't very expressive. Unless they're growling, you know, when they say a menacing line, they can't raise an eyebrow and make their eyes wider because that would look phony. So to me, some of the melodrama was lost in this because you're looking at sort of expressionless animal faces to a degree. Other than that, I thought it was really well done. I could have done without the dung joke. I think for some reason Hollywood believes that children won't know it's a children's film unless there's some kind of a rectal reference, and that puts that in there. I guess there was some in the original, but this was just like, oh great. So yes, I'm aware of what happens when a giraffe eats something and what happens on the other end. Don't need to see it. So anyway, Lion King is inescapable in theaters right now. Lion King, I don't know if you guys know, a lot of studios, especially Disney, have rules where if a theater gets a film, they have to keep it for X number of weeks, and they can't switch screens. So they can't get a film and put it on the big screen, and then when the business dies down, put it on a smaller screen. They have to take up the big screen with that, and they have to keep it for X number of weeks. So for something like a drive-in where you have generally one screen, you have a very short season, if you have to keep a movie for 4 weeks, and the multiple films have those rules, then you're only going to play a handful of films over the course of your short season. If you're an indoor theater, like the places I was going to, and you have a 16-plex or something, and you commit to having that, you've got it on a large number of your screens, and that's taking up a slot for other films, where other films could be playing. So right now we have multiple Disney films, multiple Marvel films in the theater, all of which are good, but if you're a schmo like me and has a weekend where I'm like, I'm going to go see 4 movies, and it's like, but only one has been allowed to squeeze in because Disney has a lock on all the other screens. That's why I'm only talking about 2 movies this week. The only thing that came out last week was Lion King, and the only thing that came out this most recent weekend was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I'm glad even that was allowed to squeeze in. So that's the rant over about Disney and all that stuff. They also won't let theaters play their old films, which is really kind of stupid, I think. I grew up in an era where you could go see every so many years Pinocchio in the theater, or Cinderella in the theater, or Dumbo in the theater, and at some point Disney decided, no, we don't want people to see those in the theater anymore, which I think is a shame. Anyway, write your local congressman or Disney and tell them to knock it the hell off. Thank you. So now, I wanted to say, we have an email address. It's movies@CheshireTV.org. If you want to send us a message, and by us, I of course mean me, and ask a question or give us your thoughts. If you are a normal person who went and saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what did you think? Some people think it's too long. Some people think it's not interesting. Some people think it's meandering. Some really hate the ending. Some really love it. I'm curious as to what you think, because I'm alone in a room here and I never get any feedback. So, movies@CheshireTV.org. If there's a movie you remember seeing a million years ago, the one where the guy had the red sled and it went up a wall and it was really weird because a wall is vertical. What was the title of that? Maybe I know. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'll share it on Facebook and see if anybody else knows. Anyway, movies@CheshireTV.org. Now, we move on to home video, where I have even more to talk about because it's been a few weeks. We have several titles, a bunch of Arrow. First up, is, I hate the word everybody uses, and let's say it's a remake. We have the newest take on the material of an old comic book about a half-demon, half-human, half-who-knows-what-it-is creature who fights for the side of right, who comes up from the bowels of below to fight against the forces of evil, and people say, "What the hell, boy?" Very nice. Very, very nice. See, we have a new switcher here at Cheshire TV, and we are all, and by all I mean everybody but me, are learning what this thing can do. So I'm happy to say, play with it, go crazy. Have this show be the experiment. With Facebook Live, this is the only show that's currently doing this. This is an experiment. It's bold. You get to hear the profanity that nobody at home gets to hear, that I'll be editing out moments after I leave the studio. So, Hellboy. We had Hellboy movies already. We had two from Guillermo del Toro. I liked the original Hellboy movies fine. It seems weird that we're sort of reinventing the Hellboy wheel on this, because in my mind it wasn't that long ago that these films were originally put out. Every time I say that, I realize that children who were born when those films came out are probably in high school now, so maybe it was a few years. So we are taking on Hellboy again. We're giving him an origin, maybe a different origin. We're re-educating the whole world who could just, dial up the original with their phone if they wanted to find out what he was about or look up a website intro. But I thought this was fun. This I saw as a Saturday matinee, as I see most of the things that we talk about on the program, and I thought it was a good, trashy, junky, gory, crude, fun, devil-may-care, devil-worshipping, not really, adventure story. It was fun. It didn't necessarily, I think you could have had this not be an origin story. It could have just been a quick under the credits, this is who Hellboy is, and he's fighting the end of the world with Mila Jovovich, bringing it on. But it worked for me. I would watch more of these. I don't hold the original films in tremendously precious regard, so I'm not offended that they're doing it again, maybe more on the cheap. Certainly the Del Toro films had a lot more artistry and set decor and better design for them, because that's just his thing. That's what he does. But I thought this Hellboy was fun. This is a good, get yourself a six-pack or whatever and a pizza and pop it on the TV with some friends and have a good time. Hellboy, I'm okay with more if they bring them. So now we have another film that is based on, I believe this is based on an anime or a manga, but I'm not up on my anime or manga, so this may have been original to the screen. Written by James Cameron, funny enough. The story for this was written by James Cameron. So you have Christoph Waltz, who is this scientist, this guy in this future dystopian world. The future is generally dystopian in film these days. I wonder why. And he goes and picks apart the garbage that is thrown down from the city in the clouds where all the rich folks live, and he puts together robots and things like that, and he finds this young female android, cyborg, whatever, and brings her back to life and finds out that she has a greater purpose than merely being someone who washes windows and shines thimbles. She is Alita, Battle Angel.
Here's a real champion. Ding-a-ling boxer packs a solid punch. There's a left, a right, an uppercut. Look at them go! Ding-a-ling Rocky is right on target. He's one sharpshooter that doesn't miss.
Did not know what to expect from this one. The trailers didn't look terribly attractive to me at the time. This is all based, as most of my video reviews are, this is based on a memory of seeing this in the theater like 6 months ago. Rodriguez tends to make entertaining films. He started with El Mariachi and very real-world, on-the-cheap, practical effects action films, and he has moved the total opposite of that to being high-tech, green screen, motion capture, all that stuff, which this falls into line with that. He did the Spy Kids movies, too. And the effects are outstanding in this. Now, there are moments that you can see in the trailer where you see people with like a real face and mostly CGI robot body. That looked a little cheesy and a little weird, a little awkward at some times, but overall it looked really good. And the Alita, the titular character, who's mostly CGI, entirely CGI, and has this weird look about her, kind of like two big eyes, kind of anime eyes, kind of, big eyes, Christoph Waltz funny enough, kind of that kind of vibes. At first, I didn't know how to take that, but ultimately, it feels very realistic, and it's a really sort of touching, moving performance that is given via this CGI character. It's, you know, the voice actor may have done motion capture too for the character. So I was with it for the drama. The action is actually really good. There are cool kind of stand-up and cheer moments in this, and it leads up to the, you know, fingers crossed, holding your breath idea of a sequel at the end of the film, which I always find is very presumptuous to sort of really be like, wait till we show you what happens in the next film. And it's like, well, you need to make a certain amount of money before that's going to happen. But I really do hope that this, or did hope that this did well enough to see a sequel, because I really liked this film a lot. It was a great surprise, and I would love to see where the next chapter goes. I feel like this wasn't that big of a hit, so I don't think we're really going to see a second chapter, unfortunately, but I thought Alita Battle Angel was a heck of a lot of fun. Speaking of Facebook, some of you are watching us on Facebook Live. Hi. And we're going to start putting these on Facebook Live every week. So at some point, if you follow us on Facebook, you will see an announcement, probably mere moments before we decide to sit down and tape the show, that we're doing this. The upside of Facebook Live is you can watch it live, and if I make any mistakes or if I say a really terrible word or a trailer does that I'll be editing out later, you get to see it that way. And also, these videos are stored on Facebook too. So if you go to Facebook, if you're watching this on TV and you miss an episode, all of our past episodes for the last couple weeks going forward will be stored on Facebook in full, so you can watch them at your leisure that way. And also, I will post cool screening events that I find out about, and neat sales, and cool film articles, and things that may relate to what we're talking about, or things that I think are cool and I might want to share with you. So the Facebook URL is down there if you care, and if you don't, that's fine too. So here's a movie that I forgot existed. Our old friend Dennis Quaid. You remember him from The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia and Jaws 3D, right? So do I. We have Dennis Quaid as a guy who has just sold his house to a young, upwardly mobile couple, and he wishes them the best in their life and make new memories in this home that he and his wife and family had made many of in years past. He's off to Florida to retire. But the problem is, he doesn't really go anywhere. He kind of hangs around, and he kind of worms his way into their life, and he kind of becomes the intruder. So yeah, one of those films I forgot even existed until I saw it pop up on my list. So this is very reminiscent of things that I've seen before. Pacific Heights comes to mind, Hider in the House. There's been a history of these movies where somebody who is a very benevolent person who is sort of attached to a property at some point goes away, but they don't really go away, and the benevolence seems to kind of erode over time, and suddenly they might be trying to kill you. So in this film, that person is Dennis Quaid. So I didn't expect much out of this, sort of, again, Saturday matinee thriller for me. And as a Saturday matinee thriller, I thought it was fine. I think it's a little silly at times. It gets a little ridiculous here and there, but overall, it is a relatively plausible tale of somebody who's just trying to be nice, and a couple who don't want to be rude to the person, this older guy, this guy who has good intentions, until the intentions seem a little less good over time. And then it's at what point do you pick up the shotgun, I guess is the question that this film tries to answer metaphorically and philosophically. And I thought it was fun. It's not great. It's nothing I would necessarily recommend to people. I would say if you want to see the most recent version of this kind of a story, sure, watch this one. I like Dennis Quaid. He's been in a lot of really great movies over the last several decades. The Rookie being one that people don't talk about very much, but I really liked a lot. And Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. But that was something I saw at the drive-in many years ago, and there's a story attached to that, but it's not terribly interesting. So anyway, The Intruder is out now. So that's all of the normal stuff I have to talk about. Now we move on to the Arrow Video Corner, which is personally my favorite part of the show. Arrow Video, a UK-based company that now has a US branch, and they release all kinds of oddball things to Blu-ray in just insane editions. I always say Arrow is my Criterion. A lot of people go crazy for the Criterion Collection, which is a fair thing to do. They put out the best of world cinema. Arrow puts out, for me, the most fun of world cinema. You get your Japanese gangster movies, you get your giallo films, you get your Eurocrime films, you get the occasional noir classic, and you have Arrow Academy, which is an offshoot, which does much more classic films and foreign films and serious stuff. Arrow Video tends to be the fun, gory, goofy, edgy stuff. So, first up, we have a film that I had never heard of until this disc arrived at my door. This is actually connected to another film that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago. This is the tale of what happens when some snowmobilers in Wisconsin go to the wrong cabin and open up the wrong container of evil and unleash very terrible things, and they find out the darkest meaning of the phrase, the chill factor. Very nice. Very nice. With sound effect. That's pretty cool. So chill factor. I was just trying to look at my notes, which I think I didn't take accurately enough. This is part of a couple of films that were shot simultaneously at this studio that was built somewhere. I want to say Wisconsin. I may be wrong. I'm sorry. It's been a week or two since I've watched this. It was somewhere in the northern Midwest of America, back in the late 80s, early 90s. Somebody had the desire and idea to put together a movie studio, a film and TV studio, and try to shoot, production on feature films in this snowy area that had lakes and forests and all this stuff. And there was a film that I reviewed a week or two ago, go through the archives, that was another horror film that was set in these snowy climes. And this film right here was shot with some of the same crew around the same time. Released in 1993. I'm going to say straight to video. I don't remember the box cover from that period, but if you showed it to me, I might say, oh yeah, that movie I've never seen. So we have a group of people. It's sort of the Evil Dead playbook. You have a bunch of people who go to a remote location, and there we are. We have people who are in a remote location, and they unleash some sort of evil that starts taking them out one by one. And it's not my bag, man. This is an era that I don't have a lot of fondness for. That whole late 80s, early 90s, there was something about the fashion, the aesthetics, the music, the look, the lighting, all of that I find make me a little queasy. So it's not attractive to me like a 70s film would be. I talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. One of the reasons I love that so much is I love that look and that era and what the wallpaper in the kitchens looked like. And this is an era that I don't feel that for. So I can only rely on the acting and the direction and the execution and the story and all that, which are fairly light. This is a low-budget horror movie from the early 90s. So the dialogue is not sparkling. The acting is not sparkling. Some of the violence and gore actually is amusing or impressive. So this, to me, is the kind of film that, unless you remember it and love it, you're probably going to watch this and laugh at it, which is okay. I mean, the filmmakers, I'm sure, are happy that the film is still continuing to have a life and revenue, lo these many moons later. It is an Arrow edition, so it looks phenomenal. I can't imagine it ever looked this good. If you go onto YouTube, there's a trailer for this film under an alternate title, and that is probably about as good as the movie ever looked before now, which is to say a very smeary video transfer from the early 90s. So the transfer is gorgeous. You've got a commentary. You have extras featuring the crew and cast now talking about this experience that also tie in with that other film whose title I can't remember, and a bit more of the history of this studio where these feature films were made in the middle of nowhere, far, far from Hollywood in New York, back in the late 80s, early 90s. So Chill Factor is out now on Blu-ray from Arrow. It may tickle your pickle more than it did mine. I just didn't get a lot out of it. So now we have sort of the total opposite of the Chill Factor. We have a film from the early 40s, from 1941, as a matter of fact. A very underrated Steven Spielberg comedy as far as I'm concerned. It is called, I won't tell you what it's called. Basically, this is really, I don't know how long this has been in the pipeline for a release, but it feels really timely in terms of what's going on in this country right now. So you have a guy who I believe is from overseas, from Belgium or something. He's trying to get into the U.S. via Mexico, and he's held up at the border in like this border town where everybody is sort of in a hotel. It's almost like a holding town village where people are waiting to get visas or waiting to see if they get approved or whatever, and it's this little community. Almost feels like Casablanca in some ways. People from all over the place who are waiting to be somewhere else and get out of this situation. He comes up with a plot to marry an American school teacher who's on vacation or who's on a field trip, and basically marry his way into the U.S. and then dump her once he becomes a citizen and go off and continue his dancing partnership with his old partner from his dance hall days that he meets while he's down there. Anyway, the film, there's something going on over there. The film is entitled Hold Back the Dawn. And if I'm not mistaken, we don't have a trailer for it. So,
hey Mark?
Yes?
There's no clip for this.
There's no clip for this. So we'll switch over to the main camera and I'll describe it more for you. See, this is what's weird. A lot of times Arrow will prepare trailers for these films, or they'll take the trailer off the Blu-ray or whatever. I can't take it off the Blu-ray, so I have to go to YouTube. If they don't put one on YouTube, I got nothing. So anyway, you'll have to take my word for it. This film's in black and white and it looks fantastic. We have Charles Boyer is the main character. He's the guy who's trying to get into the U.S. by hook or by crook. He's not a very nice guy. At least when the film starts, he's not a very nice guy. And the school teacher that he bumps into is Olivia de Havilland, who I think just had like her 103rd birthday. 104th birthday, something like that. I think she's the only living cast member of Gone with the Wind, and she had a long career other than that. And then you have Paulette Goddard, who was in some Chaplin films and many other films. She plays the former dance partner of Charles Boyer, who schemes with him to basically make this school teacher, who's only in town for like a day or two, fall in love and marry him and take him back to the U.S. And it's very interesting. Arrow's been releasing a lot of noir films. I wouldn't call this that. It's more of a melodrama, sort of a heavy, not heavy thematically, but sort of soap opera-y melodrama to a degree, where you have this cad who's trying to marry this very innocent, loving, nice woman, and somewhere along the way, he sort of develops feelings for her and sympathy for her and decides that maybe he's going to go through with this and not hose her afterwards. So you've got the push and pull between what Paulette Goddard wants Boyer to do and what de Havilland wants Boyer to do and what Boyer is going to decide he's going to do. And it's all set in this little idyllic Mexican town. I'm not sure where they shot this, but it's all shot on some location. It might have been the studio. It might have been just outside LA. It might have been Tijuana. Who knows? But it has a nice look to it. Crisp black and white photography. Great Arrow transfer as always. And it's just a cool little heartfelt kind of movie, and you're watching wondering which way is this guy going to go, because when you meet him, he's a sleaze. Will he remain a sleaze till the end of the film or not? It's a Hollywood movie of the 40s, so you kind of know where that's going to go. Tons of extras on this, as always. You get a Lux Radio Theater broadcast from the early 40s of this story, which they used to do. They would do a 1 hour or a half-hour version of a film that's in theaters, which now seems like an odd idea that you're kind of giving it away. Or they would do it a year or so later. So you have the full radio broadcast. You have a retrospective interview with de Havilland from decades ago, I believe. And then you have a shortish, most of the Arrow extras tend to be around the 20-minute mark, so it's about a 20-minute piece on the director of this film, who wasn't known to me previously, and his body of work, where this film falls in his body of work, what he did before and after, and all that. And funny enough, a trailer. So, Hold Back the Dawn is out now from Arrow Video. I thought it was quite good. One of the things I'm loving about Arrow is they're bringing into my home studio films that I've never heard of. Studio films from Universal or RKO or Paramount or whoever that were never popular enough to rate classic status, but are really good and interesting to see. And I like 40s movies, so it was a nice event. Speaking of movies you have heard of from studios, this was a surprise to me. Once in a while, I was talking to the guys earlier, once in a while Arrow will put out something and I'm like, really? I've heard of that. That's a mainstream movie. Arrowhead's put out things like Fish Called Wanda and other kind of big titles to me that are not in the category of horror exploitation cult world cinema like they usually do. And this would be a really big example of one of them. This is a John Hughes movie from the 80s. This is a movie I saw in the theater opening weekend. We have Anthony Michael Hall and Elin Michael Smith. Of course it is. The guy who didn't go on to the success that Anthony Michael Hall did. And they're two horny nerds who decide to Frankensteinianly use a home PC in the early 80s to create the perfect female, and mayhem and hilarity ensue in a film you've probably heard of called Weird Science. We're learning. And I'm totally legit when I say to the guys, if you need a show to screw up on and learn, make it be this one, because to me it makes it more fun, it makes it more human, right? I'm referring, of course, to things that the home viewer on TV will never have seen. That's web exclusive content. Facebook Live only is where you see the screw-ups, and maybe me dropping an F-bomb or two, who knows. So, Weird Science is a movie that probably most people watching this show have seen a bunch of times or have heard of. I have never owned it on home video. It was one that I saw in the theater as a kid, as a 11-year-old, 10 or 11-year-old, and liked a lot at the time, and I kind of just left it back there. I think I may have watched it once in the ensuing decades since it came out. And so I was really curious to watch this on Blu-ray from Arrow, because I'm thinking, is this going to hold up? Is this going to seem so 80s that I can't get into it? Is it going to seem so back there that I can't get into it? And I'm happy to report I thought it was really funny. Like, it's been long enough that I forgot about most of the movie. And the Arrow edition, A, it looks phenomenal, you know that. but the extras are insane. There's like 3 cuts of this movie. There's the theatrical version that I saw in the theater and that I believe is what was on video. There's an extended cut, which is what I watched. And then there's the TV edit, which I haven't watched on this set. So probably it's sanitized, but sometimes TV edits in the 80s would put in content that was cut out for the theatrical release to replace objectionable stuff or to pad out the running time. You'd get those fun Mickey-Ficky overdubbed swears and things like that. So I don't know what the TV edit holds in store, but it's on there. The version I watched was the extended cut. And it's extremely funny. Some of the humor probably would be seen as questionable these days, but I grew up in that era, and I think it's funny. And there are moments that are really sharp. There's a moment, something that I love about Laurel and Hardy movies and Burt Reynolds movies is when a character looks to the camera and just gives an eyebrow raise and then continues. And there's a moment where Anthony Michael Hall did that, and I had to rewind it because I was laughing so hard. It's a really fun movie. The premise is ridiculous. They take some basic PC computer and I think they hack into like a nuclear reactor or something like that, and they feed magazine cutouts into a slot on the computer, and out pops Kelly LeBrock and rocks the world. It's funny. It's horny teen wish fulfillment. It's silly. It's ridiculous. You get a very young Robert Downey Jr. with Robert Russler as these 2 like preppy bullies who sort of work their way through the film. You get a young Bill Paxton as the moron older brother. You get a lot of fun people in this movie. And I had a really, really good time with Weird Science. When I got this review disc, I had told a friend, oh yeah, I'll hand it off to you when I'm done. And now watching it again, it's like, no, I think I want to keep this. I think I want to hold on to it. This has been out on video before. It's been out on DVD before. I think it's been out on Blu-ray before. But from what I'm hearing, the Arrow version takes most of those old extras from previous editions and then piles on even more. I didn't even come close to watching much in the way of extras on this because I lead a very active, busy lifestyle, you understand. But also, there are just so many of them. I kind of want to take my time and not get burned out on this movie and see all that it has to offer, because I mean, it's the extended version, it's the TV version, it's the theatrical version, and it's deleted scenes that have never been released before. It's just ridiculous. So Weird Science is out now from Arrow Video, and that gets me caught up with Arrow Video, but there's still a pile of Arrow Video at home that I have to watch before next week, and there will be a show next week. Sorry about the sporadic thing. Holidays and me wanting to do things far away and, funny enough, watch movies away from home have kept the schedule a little weird on the show, but we should be pretty regular. We try to stay regular on this program. We're going to stay regular going forward. So next week we have, again, it appears that there's only one new movie in theaters, and it's Fast and the Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. I don't like the Fast and the Furious movies. I think they're dumb and they use cartoon cars instead of practical effects, and they shoot and cut things so badly that when they do practical effects, you can't really appreciate it, and the stunt work and all of the effort that goes into doing a stunt. You shake the camera and you put it an inch from the action. You're not doing anybody any favors, the audience, not least of which. But this movie looks like it could be fun. It's The Rock and Jason Statham as the character from those movies, wisecracking, buddy cop kind of antagonists who are forced to work together. Maybe it'll be fun, we'll see. Maybe they'll go and shoot a car on a rocket to the moon. That's what I hope for. On video, we have Detective Pikachu and The Curse of La Llorona, which was one that I saw in theaters at the time but never had time to talk about on the show, so we'll see if I can remember what that was even about. And we have Alice, Sweet Alice, coming from Arrow Video, which is a really cool movie that some people know, some people don't. I've never seen a good copy of this before. I've only seen kind of washed out prints or old public domain videotapes, so I'm really excited to pop the Arrow disc in and see what that looks like. So, I'll be back next week with fewer films to talk about, and until then, I'm Mark, I am the Cinemaniac, and I will see you at the movies. Nice!